Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. My name is Amir, and I'm joined today by the usual suspects. We have Martel. You can find him at the Miami Heat Zone podcast. We have Ernest. You can find him at Miami Heat Talk. And we have Trent. You can find him on Miami Heat Network. And we're really excited about today's episode. We have a special guest joining us today. We have Ethan J. Skolnick from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thank you so much for joining us, Ethan. How are you doing today?
Good to be with you guys.
Awesome. It's a pleasure. Thanks for being here. So we all know that the NBA trade deadline ended yesterday, and it was pretty uneventful, I think, just in general across the NBA. And we all know that the teams ahead of us in the Eastern Conference all made some sort of marginal move. The Knicks made a pretty good move. The Celtics, the Bucks, the Sixers, the Pacers, and the Miami Heat did not make a move. We did make a move for Terry Rozier a few weeks ago, but yesterday we did not make a move, to the chagrin, I'm sure, of a lot of Heat fans. So, Ethan, my first question to you is, why do you think the Heat didn't make a move? I know Caleb was our biggest asset that we could have traded, and there's probably wasn't really good people we can get in return, but we know there's gaps in our roster at the four, backup point guard, center, etc. So, why do you think we didn't make a move?
Well, I think a couple factors. The first thing is they'll tell you they made their move. So, I mean, they made their move 17 days ago. Terry Rozier finally practiced with the team today. So I was down at practice today, and I think that their expectations for where he can go from here are pretty high, considering again that he had to kind of join a moving train. I asked him today about the All Star break, and he said he was looking forward to it so he could find a spot to live. I mean, that's kind of what happens during the season. And again, these teams don't practice very much. Their schedule hasn't been conducive to it. They were on the road a little bit, so the way they look at it is their biggest need on the roster was they needed somebody who could get in the paint and maybe speed the pace somewhat and score. Honestly, I mean, they don't have enough offense, and so Rozier was out there 2.5 weeks ago, and their feeling was, let's get him in now. Let's not wait to see if another team jumps in right before the trade deadline. And so they would argue that of the players that were moved this trading period, they got one of the top 3 or 4 guys. I mean, we can talk about Anunoby to the Knicks. Obviously, Harden was traded a little bit earlier. Siakam was traded to Indiana, but Rozier's in that mix in terms of the season that he was having. And so that's the way that they view it. You look at the players that were traded yesterday, probably the most significant move in the Eastern Conference was Bogdanovich. I'm curious to see, though, how Tibbs uses him. We know Tibbs doesn't like to go deeper than about 7 or 8, particularly in the playoffs, and so I want to see how that roster kind of plays itself out. Philadelphia, they're kind of just reshuffling to try to tread water until Embiid comes back. So they got healed at a pretty good price. I had heard Indiana was looking for a lot more from him during the summer. Ended up getting him, not having to give up quite as much. So Morey, I think, did a pretty good job there. Um, and then I think they'll look to reshuffle in the offseason. I don't think he was their original target. I think they would have gone after Levine if he'd been healthy, but he wasn't, and they were already dealing with a situation with Embiid. And then I think when you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, um, Boston made a move to get a backup big. He'll help them somewhat. To me, it still comes down to what Tatum and Brown do when it matters, and whether Porzingis is going to be on the floor. And Milwaukee's got major issues. Like Patrick Beverley's not solving their defensive issues on his own. Like that, when they got Lillard, and it wasn't just sour grapes from the Heat. I talked to people in the Heat organization who felt that the Bucks got worse this offseason. That between the aging of Middleton and Brook Lopez, and then losing Drew Holiday's defense, that they were not going to be a very good defensive team, and that they didn't know if Dame would be able to compensate for that offensively. And the reality is he hasn't. I mean, he's been good, but the rest of the team has declined around Dame and Giannis. And I don't think, again, getting Patrick Beverley, who's been on 11 teams in the past 4 years, I don't think that alone is going to do it, because I don't know how much you really can play Dame and Beverley together when it matters. And Malik Beasley has not been good defensively at the point of attack. So I don't think anything happened yesterday that really scares Miami. You look at the Western Conference, that's such a shuffle right now. I mean, it's really hard to tell. The East has kind of split into tiers this year, where, at least until Embiid got hurt, it looked like Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and the Miami kind of at the top of the next tier, along with sort of the Knicks and Cleveland. You had Orlando, Indiana were kind of sort of the upstarts, then teams that should have sold like Atlanta, Chicago, and Toronto, and then teams that aren't competing. And it's pretty clear in the Eastern Conference. In the West, I don't know who's coming out of that thing. I know Denver's going to be there at the end. The Clippers have looked good for about 6 weeks now, but I mean, beyond that, it's kind of hard to tell. So I don't think anything happened yesterday that really freaks Miami out. They have to figure it out internally. Like they have to figure it out. Hero, Butler, Bam, because Tyler puts himself in that category. The three of them need to figure out how to be a plus when they're on the floor together. And that's only going to happen if Jimmy cares. It's only going to happen if Bam is more aggressive and stops settling just for the dotted line jumper. And it's only going to happen if Tyler figures out how to play off of them. And if that happens, they've got a chance. If it doesn't, they don't. It always comes down to your best players when it matters.
Great point, Ethan. And I'm really glad that you mentioned the fact that the Heat made they did what they wanted 17 days ago. Because let's be honest, in my opinion, if Miami made the trade for Terry Rozier not 17 days ago, if they did it yesterday, there would be a parade in Biscayne Boulevard. Like you can never please Miami Heat fans, in my opinion. But with the fact that you said that they got what they wanted with Rozier, we know that Martin was a tradable asset. I didn't want to let him go unless it was for someone that can help us down low. But here's my question for you, and I think it's kind of a two-parter because now that the trade deadline is over, we know what's coming up next, the buyout market. Everybody's talking about the buyout market. A lot of people are getting released. A lot of people are rumored to get released. So here's mine for you, Ethan. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I want to know, is there somebody particular in the buyout market that you feel is going to work perfectly with Miami? And does Miami already have their eyes on someone probably with the buyout market?
Well, there are 3 or 4 names, I think, and the first thing is to caution everybody because typically buyout players don't add anything. This is a little bit skewed because Kevin Love was such a perfect fit last year and honestly shouldn't have been cut loose by Cleveland, but I think his pride was hurt that he wasn't playing there anymore. Honestly, they could use him right now. He'd probably be playing ahead of Dean Wade right now, but he struggled from 3 last year and defensively, excuse me, he'd fallen off even more. But typically, buyout players work out like Mike Bibby worked out for Miami. Like it's not usually a place where you can get someone who's going to close for you. And that's the way Miami evaluates things. I always talk about this. Their whole thing about acquisition of players is this somebody that Eric Spoelstra would use? Is this one of 7 guys that Eric Spoelstra would use to close a game? If it's not, they're not going to give up much for the player. So in a buyout situation, you don't typically have to give up much. Now they can give up. They do have a mid-level. They have a vehicle that they could bring someone in if they needed to. So here are the names I would watch. They can't sign anybody because they're over the first apron. They can't sign anybody who's making more than 12.4 million prior to the buyout. So Heat fans are always complaining they don't spend enough. Well, they spent enough to get themselves above the first apron, which limits their flexibility. And mostly the reason that they don't spend is because of flexibility. It's not because of money. It's because they don't want to lose some of these vehicles. And it's another reason why they will not go into the second apron. I don't think under any circumstances. They will make sure that Andy figures out a way to get them under. But the guys I think the guy I would like them to go get is Thaddeus Young. That would be my preference because I think he can still play a little bit. But beyond that, he's a great locker room guy. He has had that reputation pretty much everywhere he's been. He's very close with Andre Iguodala, who has very positive feelings about the Heat organization and expresses them all the time. And I just think he's a perfect guy to add to that locker room. And I think Spo would use him as a small ball 5. I think he would use him occasionally next to Bam. The guy I think they're going to go after is Gallinari because they have been obsessed with Gallinari for years, and they have a habit of cycling back. Like they got Gary Payton 10 years after they wanted to get him. They thought they had Gary Payton all the way back when they re-signed Tim Hardaway in 1996. They thought they had Gary Payton signed. And by the way, Gary Payton's agent was Aaron Goodwin, who happens to be the same agent who represents Dame Lillard. They thought they had him, and Gary went back to Seattle at the time. They ended up getting him 9 years later, past his prime, but he helped them win a championship. Jake Crowder, they went after for years. Like everybody was making a big deal about, well, they got Iguodala during the COVID season. Their target was Crowder. They were trying to get Crowder forever. Trevor Ariza was another one they had looked at for a long time. There's a long list of these guys. Well, Gallinari, they've almost traded for him at least 3 times. Okay. And the last time that they almost traded for him, they might happen again, but it happened during the COVID season when they made the trade for Crowder and Iguodala and Solomon Hill. Gallinari was supposed to be part of those deals, but he wanted 3 years and they offered him 2. He wanted 3 or 1. They offered him 2, and so they didn't end up getting him. It's interesting because if they had gotten him, he was closer to his prime at that point. I wonder if that might have helped them get over the hump in the finals because they didn't have enough scoring when Goran went out and Bam got hurt. But anyway, it didn't happen. So at this point, I don't know how much Gallo has left. He's always hurt. He's not really their prototype player in a lot of different ways. They've kind of tried to recreate the prototype with Jovic. He's sort of what they want Jovic to become. So I feel like maybe it might be a way to bring him in to kind of mentor Jovic. Kevin's already doing a little bit of that anyway, but that's the guy I would look at. The other one I would look at is DeLon Wright. Obviously, relationship with Darrell. Darrell came back for Udonis's jersey retirement. And DeLon was around the Heat organization a lot. I used to see him a lot around there. So they're familiar with him, and he'd give them a point of attack defender. I don't know how healthy he is right now, though. He did give Tyler fits in the playoffs a couple years ago, if you remember. And I think he can add that element. And so, he doesn't make a ton of shots now, but honestly, he could be he might be an upgrade over Josh defensively from what we've seen this year. So he might be somebody that they add to the mix also. Those would be the 3 names. And the other one that's come up, but I haven't heard anything specific about him with Miami, but he makes sense as someone they would target is Otto Porter. But again, with Otto Porter, the question is how healthy. So those are the 4 names I would watch. Also, they're releasing RJ Hampton from his 2-way. I think they're going to probably promote Alondas Williams to that. He's been tearing it up with Skyforce, and I think there's some concern that he might get poached. But another option is Bouye, who they like a lot of things about him, but there's some things they want to coach out of him. And I think they've done some good. They brought him back after Portland briefly had him actually, and they like him. So they may elevate one of those guys to a roster spot, or they might just give Jamal Cain the the standard contract as well. But I think those of the buyout guys, those are the 4 guys I would watch, and I would watch Gallinari. I just too much smoke around that for the past few years.
That sounds very good, Ethan. Nice to meet you. My name is Trent, by the way. I have a question for you. Since, the trade deadline and the buyout market, like you said earlier, the buyout market is not going to help us win a championship. Our main goal is to win it all with the big 3 that we have. And you said it needs to be an eternal fix. So my question to you is, do you think there's any problem with Jimmy and Tyler? I feel like, in 2021, their relationship seemed a little bit better. And kind of nowadays, it seems like it's not how it used to be. And, record-wise, when all big 3 is together, is like 31 and 35 since like the start of last season. So it's not the greatest at the moment. And like you said earlier, too, if we're going to win a championship, we need them all playing well together. So do you think there's any problem, or do you think it's just the team's just not constructed well enough to, go over the hump? But I'm mainly on the big 3 of the sense of Tyler and Jimmy.
I don't think there's a personal issue with Jimmy and Tyler. I think their relationship has gone up and down.
Okay.
I think there was, when Tyler was drafted and Jimmy signed, Jimmy invited Tyler to Chicago. And Tyler stayed with Jimmy for a week in Chicago. Not only did he stay with him for a week, Jimmy came down to close on a house and had Tyler fly down with him. It was at the closing with him. So Jimmy, like he sort of saw with Jaquez and Jovic, that he's kind of taken some guys under his wing. He did that with Tyler. There was some stuff I heard about in their second season that involved people around them that I think damaged their relationship for a period of time. I don't want to get into a ton of details, but in sports and locker rooms, there's typically something that damages relationships between guys. So I had heard some stuff in the second year. But it seemed to have been patched, whatever it was. I don't think that's the issue. I see Jimmy wait for Tyler. I remember on Tyler. I think it was on Tyler's birthday that Jimmy was waiting by the door. Says, when are you guys all going to dinner? Hit me up, this and that. So I don't sense uh, a coldness there at this point. I don't, look, it's never been like Jimmy and Bam are not close. You know what I mean? Like they're not close. Like I don't think there's any personal strife there, but they're not like we see certain. It's not like Curry and Clay. Okay, they're very different people. I think Bam has grown into himself since he's been in Miami. He's a very different person than Jimmy. Um, I think Bam cares more about what everybody in the locker room thinks of him than Jimmy does. And so I don't think it's always been a perfect natural fit in terms of personalities. But I think the bigger issue is I think they get along well enough. I think the issue is it's a on court fit. And Jimmy and Bam have accomplished a lot considering that they don't fit perfectly. Like there are not a lot of if you look at the duos around the league that have had success, usually one of them is a 3-point shooter, at least. Like they occupy similar places on the floor. And I think that's the real issue. I don't even think it's the on ball stuff. I think it's Jimmy likes to operate from the post out to the mid range, right? I mean, he's made it 3 in 10 straight games, but that's not his game. Bam likes the dotted line jumper. That's where everybody wanted him to shoot that. That's what he's been shooting, right? Uh, and nobody on the team can throw him a lot, although Terry looks like he has the ability to do that. And Tyler likes to get to that floater. So you're all occupying similar places. And I talked to Josh about that. And Josh, that's been one of the struggles Josh has had is that he likes to get into the paint to that floater. That's where he's comfortable. That's where he builds rhythm. He's like, but everybody's already there. And I think that's why Duncan, even though he had improved some of that dribble drive game and mid-range game and stuff, but we know that Duncan has gravity that nobody else on the team has. And I think that is why those lineups have always looked better with Bam and Jimmy, because it's created more space. And the numbers suggest that those lineups are better. But the problem is that Duncan's upside is not Tyler's upside. The team doesn't view it that way. And so it's the three of them that have to make it work. Like, they need to get Duncan going. He's in a bit of a rut right now. They need to get Hawkins going. Jaime came back from the groin injury and has been out of rhythm, out of sorts. I don't think him competing in this. We reported the slam dunk thing first. We knew it was going to happen about 2 months ago, but I don't think it's the best thing for him right now. I don't think, honestly, he needs a break instead of, dunking, doing Rising Stars, and doing 25 promotional appearances in Indianapolis. Like, I think he could use a week or two, but it is what it is. So they need to get those guys going. But ultimately, they need to figure out the Tyler thing is the most important thing they need to figure out because, I mean, it's always the third guy. It's always the third guy. Like, if you go back in Heat history, it's if you go back to the very beginning, it was Tim and Zoe and Mash, and then they subbed out Mash, and they brought in Eddie, and then they subbed out Eddie to get other parts, and then it's always going to be the third guy. That's who everybody asks for. The Heat are not pitching him around the league, but that's who teams do ask for. There is value in Tyler Hero, but ultimately, if it doesn't work as the third guy, they're not subbing out the first two. So he's got to make it work. I talked to him for a few minutes. We just did a podcast about it. I got him on the side to talk about his relationship with Terry so far and how that's working. And he seems energized by it. I know people took the comments as kind of anti-Lowry. I just think he likes having someone who'll run with him and who kind of has energy, because Kyle had sort of very negative energy by the end. And so I think that there's a real opportunity for Tyler and Terry to create something together that is a game beyond just Jimmy and Bam. And I think if Tyler just needs to find a niche with somebody on this team so that he's additive to them instead of subtracting from them.
Got you. Now, last question, Ethan. Now, once again, thank you so much for coming on. Now, you said that it mentioned with Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler, right? What do you think about the roster construction that the Miami Heat have put around them? Because, like it's kind of like what you said, like it starts like with them first. So with us not really having a quote unquote power forward next to Bam Adebayo for the past few years, like when it comes down to Caleb Martin and with Highsmith, yes, they can do it. And then same thing with the point guard next to Tyler Hero. You know how they always say that Tyler Hero is not the best defender. So in terms of just adding to the core that we have, do you think that the Miami Heat have done their best job with putting the right players to complement our best players?
Well, there's two ways to look at this. There's, what Pat Riley might do and what Eric Spoelstra likes to do, right? So, I mean, you're ultimately getting the players that your coach is going to use. If it was up to Pat, okay, I firmly believe he would find someone 6'10" or taller, you know, to bang on the boards, take that burden off of Bam, and free him up. Spo's not going to play that guy. I mean, unless the guy is elite, he's not going to play that guy. And so what they basically have is they've got a bunch of guys who can play the 4 who all do something a little different but aren't perfect for it. Like, if you got Kevin Love 5, 6, 7 years ago, he's perfect. Like, he's absolutely perfect for what you need next to Bam. But now he can only do it in spurts. If you have Jovic 5 years from now, he might be perfect. But right now, he's not. So what's the alternative? Okay, so you play an athlete in Caleb, or you play kind of a grunt defender in Haywood, right? And they're midgets compared to the guys that they're going against most nights. But they didn't really have a choice early in the season because Kyle couldn't defend anybody at the point of attack. So that made it impossible to play when they were playing Jovic with him. I'm like, how exactly are you going to defend guards? Because, or are you playing Love with him? You had to play Highsmith or Martin because you have to have your 4s basically pick up the other team's 1s and 2s because you couldn't have Tyler and Kyle do it. Now that you have Terry, he's not a great defender, but he gives you a chance. And so I feel like there's a little bit more flexibility at the 4 spot now where they could play Love a little longer, could play Jovic a little more. The thing with Jovic is he needs the ball in his hands, and this team isn't ready to give it to him. But there's also people in the organization who are not willing to give up on him. Like Chet Kammerer, we saw him there today. I guess he's never really going to retire. He loves it. That's his pet project, and Adam Simon. And Pat trusts those 2 guys. So I don't think they're going to give up Jovic. They were willing to give him up for Dame. They were not willing to give up. They were not willing to give up Hawkes. Pat was willing to give him up. Others in the organization were not. They would defer to Pat ultimately, but I just feel like they what they need is a Dorian Finney-Smith type. But were you going to give up 2 first-round picks for Dorian Finney-Smith? No. So I think that Spo will mix and match right now. I think Jimmy will end up playing a lot of 4 in the playoffs when it just comes down to it, and they'll get Duncan out there to space or they'll get Hawkes. And look, I think Jaime ultimately may be the 4. I think he might because Jaime can defend the position. He's stronger than he looks. And I think, we've seen lately teams are taking away certain things from him. He loves offensively, he loves that spin to the middle. They're not giving it to him anymore. He's going to have to adjust to the adjustments. But I do think overall, he's going to be a starter next year. So you got to find a place for him to start because the way that they talk about him to me, and they were talking about this 2 months ago, our future is Bam, Tyler, and Jaime, and maybe Nico. So that's the build. It's Jimmy this is a bridge build. It's it's a bridge build from Jimmy to that group. And then they're going to have a tough decision to make. If Jimmy's not going to be one of your 2 or 3 lead guys, are you paying him $50 million for 2 more years after this? And that's going to be where we start to have some interesting conversations.
I agree. So thank you so much. Thanks for joining us again, Ethan. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for all the information. So the Miami Heat, we have a couple days off until our next game, and we're at our inflection point right now. This is a very important stretch, as we've mentioned in prior episodes. The schedule's been really tough after that 7-game losing streak, but more importantly, this road trip is going to be super tough, playing the Celtics, Bucks, Sixers, Pelicans, Kings, Nuggets. The only easy game we have in there is the Trailblazers. So this is going to be a really important stretch.
Yeah. They're not home the whole month, and I think that's why they wanted to get Rozier in early, so that they could at least get him acclimated somewhat before they hit this stretch. And I look, the goal right now is hold the 5 or the 6. Just hold it. Don't end up in the 7. Don't end up in a play-in situation. I don't think they're afraid of anybody in the East. Boston is the one team, obviously talent-wise, but they also know they can win on that floor. They're not afraid of Milwaukee, certainly not afraid of Philadelphia with Embiid's situation, not afraid of Cleveland, not afraid of New York. They need a motivated, energized Jimmy Butler, and they feel like they can compete with just about anyone. And but they have to figure out a way to just scrape out enough wins to hold the 6 and not end up in a play-in situation where it comes down to 1 or 2 games. I think if they get the 5 or the 6, they can win a series starting on the road against a New York, against a Cleveland. I don't think that freaks them out in any way.
Yeah, it's frustrating that people say that this team is built to be a playoff team and that we turn it up in the playoffs and Jimmy awakens, in April, May, June. And I'm tired of that because if you look back at the last 10 teams that won the championship, 7 out of 10 were the number 1 seed. That's 70%.
Yeah.
If we go back to when the ABA or BAA merged with the NBA in 1950, so for the last 73 years, 51 out of 73 that won, guess what seed they were? Number 1. Guess what percent that is?
Right.
70. Numbers don't lie. So it's cool that we're trying to optimistically get to that 5th or 6th seed. But we mentioned this on another episode. When was the last time that happened? Houston Rockets, 1995, they were the 6th seed. 1969, the Celtics, the 4th seed. It doesn't happen for a reason. You need to be it's not mutually exclusive. Like, I feel like you need to be a good team, take it serious in order to go far. And I am biased. I am a Heat fan, and I'm satisfied that we're a good team and we're not like a poverty franchise, right? Only half the league has ever won a championship. So I'm obviously happy and blessed that we've won 3, but it's not good enough at this point to just get there at this point. I'm tired of getting to the finals. I don't know. We need to shake things up, I guess, and just be healthy, I guess, for one. Who knows? I mean, health has always been an issue with us in terms of seeding, but we'll see. So this is going to be a big stretch. But anyway, thank you so much again, Ethan. We really appreciate you. If you want to plug in where people can find you, if you want to let the audience know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. 5 Reasons Sports Twitter account. We post everything there, but we do recommend not just check out the 5 on the Floor podcast, which we go daily, but also our Discord called Off the Floor. We're up to over 500 members there now, and that's where you can communicate with other Heat fans. Get away from Twitter, X, all that. It's just Heat Talk. $2.99 per month, and it's all day. And the hosts of 5 on the Floor, we pop in there with updates and behind the scenes stuff. So we're moving away from Twitter. We're moving more to Off the Floor. So make sure you check that out. And also, you can watch the games with us on playback. We do every game on playback. We do the play-by-play, and that's free. So just download the playback app and look for 5 Reasons Sports, and we'll be on there tomorrow at 2:00 against this game against the Celtics. But thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And we'll see. I think they're going to be okay. They're going to be okay. And if they're not, I do think they'll make changes this offseason. So you got something to look forward to one way or the other.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you.
Thank
again.
you so much, Ethan. We appreciate it.
Nice to meet you, man.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys.
Take care.